Hey guys, tonight we're heading into a place so cold, so bleak, and so hauntingly empty, it makes your refrigerator look like the tropics. You're standing on the deck of a grand Victorian expedition ship, the HMS Erebus, watching your breath form little icy ghosts in the Arctic air. Thick coats and hopeful faces surround you. Everyone's cheerful, for now. There's talk of discovery, maps being rewritten, and eternal glory back in London. But let's be honest, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where, and when, you all tune in. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It's 1845, and you're walking up the gangway onto the deck of a ship that feels more like a floating castle. The HMS Erebus and her sister ship, Terror, are the crown jewels of Arctic exploration. Reinforced hulls, steam engines, 1,000 books in the onboard library, lemon juice for scurvy, and even a hand-cranked organ, because nothing says, prepared for the Arctic, like a little music to distract from frostbite. You're one of 129 men under Sir John Franklin. A man so dignified his nickname is literally, the man who ate his boots. And if that nickname gives you pause, trust your instincts. He earned it decades ago when stuck on another failed Arctic mission, yes. Another. And yes, he did boil and eat the leather from his footwear. And now, here you are again, sailing into the ice under his command. You might be questioning your life choices, but you're part of something grand. There's national pride stuffed into every inch of the ship, right next to all the salt pork and powdered potatoes. England has declared this voyage will finally discover the Northwest Passage, a shortcut to the Pacific that will make trade routes faster, safer, and ideally more profitable. The only catch? No one's entirely sure it exists. Still, spirits are high. You set sail in May, leaving the misty shores of England behind. Crowds cheer. Families wave handkerchiefs. There's even a brass band. You promise your sweetheart you'll be back by Christmas. You won't. The early days are pleasant. You're passing Greenland, joking with shipmates, carving initials into timbers. You learn which guy snores and which one steals extra rations. Seabirds wheel overhead. You even catch sight of a curious polar bear once, lumbering across an ice floe like it has someplace else to be. But then, the temperature drops. First come the slushy floes. Little islands of ice knocking against the hull like beggars at the door. Then, thicker sheets form. By September, the ships are trapped in a frozen vise just off King William Island. You've heard of wintering in the Arctic, but living through it is a different story. The sun disappears in late October. It won't return for months. You pass time as best you can. There are lectures, readings from Shakespeare, and plenty of backgammon. Someone makes a puppet out of walrus skin. You laugh a little too hard at that. It's not that funny, but it is distraction. And that's precious. Then, things grow quieter. By January, food supplies are already raising eyebrows. You're eating out of tin cans, fancy, newfangled things mass-produced in London by a contractor named Stephen Goldner. He promised they were safe, nutritious, and perfectly sealed. He also rushed the job and used lead-based solder on nearly every seam. You notice men growing irritable. Their joints ache, gums swell, teeth loosen, and not in the gentle, poetic way. You're chewing hardtack and feeling like you're gnawing on bricks. Your stomach feels odd. Not new food, odd. More like your intestines are staging a revolt, odd. You're sick, and you're not the only one. Nobody says the word poison, but it's in the air. Somewhere between the sulfuric smell of melting snow and the silence that falls during dinner. Still, you're British. You make tea. You complain politely. And you keep going. Time becomes a circle. You sleep in freezing shifts, wake with limbs numb, and dream of sunrises that don't come. You try to write home, but the ink freezes mid-sentence. You try to walk for exercise, but the frostbite makes your feet feel like stone. And then, just as you think things can't get worse, they do. One morning, a crewmate doesn't wake up. They say he passed peacefully. But when they lower him through a hole in the ice, the solemn moment is undercut by the creak of the ice groaning beneath your feet. It sounds almost hungry. You press on. Every day is a guessing game. Will the weather lift? Will the ice crack? Will the ships break free? They don't. By the time the second winter comes around, yes, a second winter, you realize this isn't just bad luck. It's a trap. The Arctic doesn't want to let you go. Men begin whispering about the march. It's a plan to abandon the ships and head south, on foot, hauling sledges across an endless white desert. Hoping for rescue that may or may not exist. You start wondering if your boots are edible. Outside, the wind howls like a pack of wolves. Inside, the ship creaks like it's trying to complain but doesn't have the strength. Someone plays the organ one last time. The notes sound hollow, like the skeleton of a song. And still, you hope. Because you have to. Because what else is there? You stare out at the horizon. Nothing moves. Nothing answers. But somewhere out there, you think you see a line of footsteps in the snow. And then they vanish. You wake to a faint tapping. At first, it sounds like a bird against the hull. But there are no birds here anymore. The only things moving outside are snowflakes and shadows. You lie still, your body stiff from cold. Your breath puffing pale clouds into the dim air of the ship's lower deck. The tapping again. This time, closer. You sit up slowly, careful not to bump your head on the low wooden beams. The man across from you, Richardson, quiet fellow, red beard, stares blankly at the ceiling. Lips moving without sound. He's been doing that more and more lately. Muttering names, numbers, half-remembered verses of hymns. You're starting to wonder if he's praying or slowly unraveling. On deck, the tapping turns out to be MacDonald, the carpenter, chiseling ice off the rigging. He works with a strange, practiced rhythm, like he's carving a tombstone. He nods at you but doesn't speak. Nobody's much for conversation anymore. The crew has begun to fracture. You notice the cliques now, men who trust each other, and men who absolutely do not. Some hoard rations, some whisper in corners, others stare out at the frozen horizon like it owes them an apology. And speaking of rations, it's time for breakfast. You join the line in the makeshift galley, waiting for your ladle full of stew. It's hard to say what's in it anymore. Definitely some salted pork, maybe peas, or possibly buttons. You find yourself chewing something gritty and hope it's just a bit of spilled tea. Today is notable. You're getting a new tin delivery from the lower hold. When the crew pops the lids, several of them hiss, loudly. Gas escapes. That's not normal. The meat inside is gray. Not the kind of gray that suggests rare delicacy. More the kind that suggests chemical mystery. Dr. Goodsir, the assistant surgeon with the thoughtful eyes and increasingly sunken cheeks, takes samples. He frowns. Later, you hear him mumbling about lead, and solder, and accelerated decay. Words no one wants to hear out loud. See, the food was supposed to last 5 years. Canned meat, soups, even dessert, pudding with raisins. But now, nearly 2 years in, it's spoiling from the inside. One barrel of pickled cabbage explodes in the storeroom. It takes them a day to clean the walls. Meanwhile, the crew's symptoms worsen. Bleeding gums, twitching hands. Some men see lights when they close their eyes. Others forget where they are mid-conversation. You feel like your body is fighting a silent war, and losing. Historians still argue whether the canned food was the main culprit. Some say it was botulism. Others believe the water filtration system was contaminated. Or maybe the entire environment, metal cookware, lead pipes, soldered cans, was a toxic stew of slow death. Either way, you're drinking poison with every meal. But the officers? They remain optimistic, or at least pretend to be. Sir John Franklin insists spring will bring a thaw. The passage will open. The mission will continue. Press on, he says. Victory favors the bold. You're pretty sure victory favors the living. But you nod politely. You remember the ship's library and the copy of Paradise Lost you've been slowly working through. In a rare moment of grim humor, someone carved, "Abandon all hope," into the book's spine. You try not to think about it. And still, life finds a rhythm. You repair boots, patch sails, carve chess pieces. Some men play cards using buttons as currency. Others just sleep, curled like cats in the narrow hammocks, wrapped in layers of wool and despair. There's a daily medical check, though fewer show up now. Some have stopped caring. Others fear being reassigned to worse duties if they complain. You wonder if you're one of the lucky ones. Your fingers still work. Mostly, your hair hasn't fallen out. Yet, then come the dreams. They're vivid, too vivid. You dream of green fields, Warm sun. Real bread. You can almost smell it. Sometimes you wake up licking your lips. Sometimes you wake up crying. Other times, you wake up unsure if you ever fell asleep. One night, a crewman screams. Not in pain. More like he saw something. It takes 3 men to calm him. He says he saw the captain on fire. Walking across the deck, smiling. The captain is not on fire. The captain is asleep in his cabin. The next day, the man is gone. They say he walked off the ship at night. Just stepped into the white. You imagine it, the cold biting your cheeks. The stars overhead like chipped ice. And the sound, nothing. No wind, no voices. Just your boots crunching across snow as your mind unravels thread by thread. The next few days blur. Someone loses fingers to frostbite. A dog dies. Another man swears he saw trees in the distance, even though you all know there are no trees for hundreds of miles. But he swears. Birch bark. He says, I touched it. You don't argue. Because if he's wrong, you're all still trapped. And if he's right, well, then you missed your chance. One day, Lieutenant Gore calls an office's meeting. You're not there, but rumors ripple through the crew. They're considering abandoning the ships. There's talk of heading south, toward Back River. It's hundreds of miles away, across open ice. But the ships are dying. The food is dying. The men are already half dead. By the end of the week, Sir John Franklin is dead. It's sudden. He seemed stable just days before. Some say it was a stroke. Others whisper about internal bleeding. Something from the food, or the cold, or the weight of command crushing his heart. His body is wrapped and buried in the ice. No marker, no ceremony, just a nod, and a shuffle of feet. Now command falls to Captain Crozier, the quieter of the 2 leaders. Thoughtful, respected, known for drinking, once, but not anymore. You're not sure if that's good or bad. And so, the tapping resumes. Not birds, not ghosts, just men, slowly chiseling the ship free from the ice, not to sail it, but to salvage wood for sledges. You're going to walk into the Arctic with 100 men, dragging lifeboats across frozen sea. You tie a scarf around your face, sling your pack over your shoulders, and look up at the sky. A faint aurora flickers above, green, blue, a hint of red. It looks like fire in slow motion. And you wonder, was this what hope looked like before it froze? You're standing on the ice now, boots crunching softly with each shift of your weight. Behind you, the Erebus and Terror loom like stranded whales, massive, dark, silent. Their masts rise above the ice like skeletal trees, rigging swaying in the polar breeze that somehow always finds your skin no matter how many layers you wear. The ships aren't homes anymore. They're coffins with anchors. Captain Crozier's plan has moved from whispers to action. You and the remaining crew are to march south toward the Back River. It's only, 600 miles across sea ice, tundra, and territory you've never set foot on. No maps, no paths, just the vague hope that someone, somewhere, will find you before you starve or freeze, or both. You load your portion of the sledge. It's heavier than you'd like, and someone stuffed in the cooking gear last. There are lifeboats strapped to some of the sledges, just in case, though you'd need a miracle thaw for that to be relevant. Each sledge weighs hundreds of pounds. It takes 6 men to move one. And then you begin. Your pace is slow, deliberate. You can't risk breaking through thin ice, though much of it feels like iron beneath your feet. The wind stings, and your eyelashes frost. Each breath hurts your lungs. Your nose runs, then freezes, and your beard crusts into a salty, icy mess. The sledges screech like groaning ghosts every time you stop. Hours blur. You pass small markers, little cairns, copper tubes tucked inside with notes to future rescuers, names and dates scribbled by shaking hands. Some are cheerful, or at least pretend to be. All well, spirits high. You don't remember writing that, but it's your handwriting. Maybe it was true once. You stop every few miles to rest. When you do, someone takes a tally. How many are still walking? How many are too weak? How many must be left behind tomorrow? There are never enough blankets. Your feet are turning against you. The cold has seeped through your boots, into your bones. You can't feel 3 toes. You're not sure which ones. You don't look. Night comes quickly here. One minute the world is gray-white, the next, it's a void. You build a wall of snow to shield the camp from wind. Light a small fire if the fuel allows. and huddle in packs like wolves, except wolves are built for this. You dream that night of London. Gas lamps and cobblestones. A meat pie on every corner. Someone says your name. You turn, and they're gone. Morning is cruel. One man didn't wake. Another is missing. He wandered off during his watch. You find his mitten near a frozen pool. Fingers still inside. You do not look for the rest. The march continues. At one point, you cross a patch of snow so flat and vast it feels like walking across a blank page. Nothing but sky above, ice below. You wonder if the world has ended and left you behind. One man cracks. He throws down his sledge strap and screams into the wind. Nonsense. Or maybe poetry. No one stops him. He falls silent, picks up the strap, keeps walking. You stop trying to remember names. You speak in gestures. You no longer taste the food, just measure it. 3 ounces of meat, a spoon of flour, water melted from snow you hope isn't contaminated. It always is. And yet, there are moments of strange beauty. A fox crosses your path one morning. Red against the white. It stares at you, blinks, then trots away like this is all perfectly normal. A sign, maybe, or a mockery. Then there's the aurora again, this time blue and gold, rippling like a curtain in slow motion. The sky dances above your misery. Indifferent but spectacular. You want to applaud, but your hands are too cold. You find another cairn. This one's different. It contains a note in 2 handwritings. The top part, written months ago, says all is well. The bottom part, scrawled more recently, is less cheerful. 20 dead. Sir John Franklin is dead. The ships are deserted. Your stomach sinks. You already knew, but seeing it in writing makes it real again. Sir John, the man who led you here with so much fanfare, is part of the ice now, and you're following in his footsteps. That same day, someone finds bones. They're arranged strangely, almost deliberately. Clean, picked. Someone says nothing, but everyone understands. You try not to stare at the femur. Historians still debate whether the cannibalism began here or later, whether it was necessity or madness, whether it happened at all. But you were there, and you remember the quiet that followed. No accusations, no guilt, just silence. The next few days blur again. More snow, more wind, less food, fewer voices. One man tries to sing and forgets the words. Another hums constantly, off-key. Then, a turning point. You come across what looks like a hut, Inuit made. Abandoned but sturdy. Inside, warmth, relatively speaking, enough to light a fire. A place to breathe. You rest. You mend boots. Check your toes. One's gone black. You wrap it tighter. That night, someone carves a chess set from bone. He offers to play. You accept, knowing you won't remember the outcome. The following day, a decision is made. Half the group pushes forward. Lighter, faster. They take the best food. The others, older, weaker, frostbitten, stay behind with promises of return. You know those promises are lies. Beautiful, comforting lies. You're part of the advance team. Your feet are bleeding. Your fingers are numb, but you can still move. And that's enough. You leave at dawn. No one looks back. The sun is trying to return, but it's shy this far north. It hovers low, casting long shadows over the ice that stretch and twist like sleeping giants. Your shadow, as you trudge forward, looks taller than you've ever felt. Each step now is deliberate. The group ahead moves in near silence. There's no breath to spare for talking. No cheer left to share. Only the creak of sledges, the crunch of frost beneath boots, and the occasional grunt when someone stumbles over a snowdrift that looked flatter than it was. Your world has shrunk to the rhythm of your own steps. Left, right, drag, repeat. Captain Crozier is with you. His frame slightly hunched, eyes narrowed against the wind. He doesn't give speeches, doesn't bark orders. He just walks, and the others follow because someone has to. There's a brief excitement when someone spots a cluster of rocks in the distance, maybe a landmark, maybe shelter, but it turns out to be nothing more than ice-covered stones. You sit on one for a while anyway. It feels solid, real. You take a bite of your ration, salted pemmican, a mix of fat and meat. It's supposed to keep you alive. Today, it tastes like paper soaked in seawater. You chew slowly, swallow with effort. Every bite is survival, or at least the ritual of it. That night, you camp behind a ridge. You build a wall of snow to cut the wind and huddle close. Someone starts to sing softly. the minstrel boy, but his voice fades before the second verse. Nobody picks it up. You lie on your side, staring at a sky filled with more stars than you can count. Feeling the sharp bite of cold through every layer of clothing. You don't sleep much. When you close your eyes, you see the ship, still anchored in the ice, still waiting, or maybe just sinking, piece by piece, into a grave of snow. By now, you've stopped expecting rescue. The supply ships haven't come. The Royal Navy promised a follow-up expedition, but you're too far gone, too far lost. Even if they came now, you'd be hard to find. And then something changes. You spot a footprint, not one of yours, not English boots, either. A soft-edged indentation, wider and flatter, like a snowshoe. You all stop. No one speaks, but your heart quickens. Could someone be nearby? A hunting party? A camp? You follow the trail. After an hour, you find something remarkable. A small igloo, collapsed at one side, clearly old, clearly unused, but near it, a bundle wrapped in fur. Inside, dried fish, real fish. You divide it like treasure. A sliver each. It tastes like ocean and smoke. A flavor so intense your tongue twitches. It's gone in seconds. And then, a flicker of hope. The next day, you meet them, Inuit hunters. Silent, graceful, dressed in caribou skins. They stare at you as if watching ghosts stagger out of the mist. One of them points at your boots. Another touches your coat, feels the buttons, the wool. They speak to each other in low voices. Then one gestures for you to follow. You do. They lead you to a wider shelter. Half buried in snow but warm. They offer seal meat, whale blubber, a broth so thick and salty you nearly cry. You eat too fast and nearly vomit. But you manage. Your body, desperate, accepts the nourishment like it's remembering how to live. Communication is difficult, but over time, words and gestures connect you. You learn that they've seen others, men like you, farther west, some walking, some crawling. They tell you of camps, of broken sledges, of bones. You listen in silence. And then, one of them brings out a boot. British make, clearly from your expedition. You don't ask where they found it. The next few days are the strangest blend of survival and reflection you've ever experienced. You're warm, you're fed, but you can't stay. Not forever. You're still part of a mission. A ghost of a goal. Maybe, but you can't let it go. One of the Inuit elders points to the south. He draws a line in the snow. There's a river, he says, leads to a place where white men have passed. You nod, you hope. You leave them with what little you can spare, buttons, a knife, a scarf. The elder touches your shoulder and mutters something low. A blessing, you think, or a farewell. Back on the trail, things are quieter. The group is smaller now. Some stayed behind, others didn't wake. One morning, you pass a strange sight, 3 bodies, sitting upright in the snow. Their faces are peaceful, hands folded, as if they decided to rest and simply never moved again. Ice has grown over their eyelids. You do not stop. Another day, you find a lifeboat on a sledge. Inside, 5 bodies. One appears to have been chewing leather. Another still clutches a spoon. A third has teeth marks, human, unmistakably, on the upper arm. You move on without words. Historians still debate whether this was desperation or madness. Whether men drew lots. Whether some volunteered. Whether others were helped along. You remember the taste of that fish from the Inuit shelter and feel a wave of nausea. You are not proud, but you are alive. Weeks pass. The land changes. More rocks. Less ice. Sparse brush. You even see a tree. Just one, but it's real. You touch it to be sure. Bark. Splinters. Life. Your pace quickens. One afternoon, you spot smoke. You run. You stumble. You fall. But when you rise, you're close enough to see a camp, a real one. Tents. Horses. People. A search party. Not for you specifically. They're mapping rivers. But when they see your face, your uniform, their eyes widen. They thought you were all dead. You almost were. They take you in, feed you, wrap your feet, ask questions you don't want to answer. They write letters. You dictate yours with shaking hands. Alive, you say, some of us. You give names, locations, clues. You try not to say the word cannibalism. They nod anyway. You rest. And when you sleep that night, under canvas instead of stars, in warmth instead of bone-deep cold, you dream of nothing. It's the best dream you've had in years. The journey home is both a return and a reckoning. You're not the same man who left England. That man had all his fingers. That man believed in glory. That man thought canned meat was the height of civilization. Now, wrapped in borrowed wool and leaning on a stick, you're carried partway by sled, then by boat, then by train. The landscape slowly shifts from vast, white silence to muddy roads, brick chimneys, and the distant clang of iron and steam. Civilization doesn't so much welcome you as it observes you, curious, cautious, unsure what you are now. When you step off the train in London, it's raining. Of course it is. You're met by a few officials, naval men, pale-faced bureaucrats with black gloves and clipboards. One of them shakes your hand like he's afraid your frostbite might be contagious. Another hands you a blanket even though you're indoors. They ask questions, soft-voiced, careful. You tell them what you can. You avoid the worst parts. They don't press. You're housed in a quiet medical facility, a place meant for returning explorers and quietly broken officers. The beds are clean. The food is edible. You have sheets for the first time in years. It's here that you start to dream again. Real dreams, not the hungry kind. Sometimes you see the stars over King William Island. Sometimes it's the face of a crewman long gone, one you never said goodbye to. And sometimes you dream of the ship, not the wreck, but the way it looked that first day. Flags flapping, brass gleaming, Franklin tipping his hat. You're given a journal to write in. The first page stays blank for days. Then, one night, you scribble a sentence. We walked until we stopped being men. No one tells you what to do next. There's no ceremony, no fanfare. You're technically a survivor, but there's no official medal for outliving a ghost fleet. Meanwhile, the public is conflicted. Word has spread faster than you thought possible. Newspapers blare headlines. Franklin expedition lost? Arctic horror. Cannibalism suspected. Man returns from the ice. Your name appears in articles, often misspelled. You're referred to as a source close to the events. A witness. Once, bizarrely, as Arctic hero. You don't feel like one. Some people won't meet your eyes. Others ask for details in hushed tones at dinner parties. One woman sends you a tin of meat. As a joke, you do not laugh, but some want truth, and so, you begin to speak, carefully. You describe the march, the hunger, the cairns and the buttons and the bones. You mention the Inuit, how they helped, how they warned, how they were ignored. You try to emphasize the humanity of it all. Still, no one listens fully. They want monsters or martyrs, not men. Historians still argue whether the cannibalism was a last resort, or something that set in earlier. Quietly, behind closed tent flaps, they argue whether Franklin died of sickness or something darker, whether Crozier led a mutiny, whether you, the survivors, should have done more, said more. But how do you explain it? How do you describe what it feels like to lose a ship? Then your strength, then the part of your soul that still dreamed? You write more in your journal. You recall the sound of creaking wood as the ice crushed the Terror into splinters. The crack was like thunder. Men cried. One fell to his knees. You didn't move, just watched. You remember the snow melting slightly in early spring, the water dripping from the sails like the ship was weeping. You remember Sir John's face, waxy and still, wrapped in canvas with a Union Jack. You remember a spoon, just a spoon, bent at the handle, initials scratched in with a pin. It belonged to a boy barely 18. He used to hum while stirring tea. You keep the spoon. Not all memories are grim. You remember a joke MacDonald once made about opening a fish and chip stand in the Arctic. Fresh snow cod, he said, battered with blubber. You laughed for a full minute. Your ribs hurt from it. You write that down, too. Eventually, you're called to testify. The Admiralty wants answers. Parliament wants headlines. You sit in a dark paneled room, facing men who've never been north of Aberdeen, much less into polar ice. They ask if you saw evidence of impropriety. You choose your words like stepping stones across a frozen lake. You say, there were moments of desperation. They nod. You say, we did what we thought necessary. They write. One man asks about the boat with bones. You pause, then say, we left no one behind. Not really. It satisfies them. You walk out feeling like a riddle. Months pass. The weather warms. You feel it in your joints. The ache dulls. You spend more time outside. Sometimes in parks. Sometimes at the docks. Watching ships. Listening to gulls. Then, one day, you receive a letter. It's from a woman, young, educated, curious. She writes, "My brother was on the Terror. Do you remember him? Did he die well?" You hold the paper for a long time. Then you write back. You say, "He was kind. He helped others. He sang when we were afraid. He is remembered." You do not lie. And then, years later, you hear the news. They've found it. The Erebus. Or maybe the Terror. A Canadian expedition. Sonar picked it up. Still intact. Mostly. Sitting beneath the ice like a sealed memory. Divers bring back artifacts. Buttons. Books. Even a boot. One still has a foot inside. You feel the pull to go. To see it one last time. You don't. Instead, you sit in your chair. Journal on your lap. And look out the window as the rain falls. England. Forever damp. Forever gray. But you think of the aurora. You think of silence. You think of the men who did not return. And you remember the first step you took off the ship. Onto that glistening, deadly ice. You didn't know then what you were walking into. You do now. The wind has a voice. It's something you never quite understood until you heard it in the Arctic. The way it whistles low across the ice ridges. Brushes against your ears like cold fingertips. And moans softly through the bones of the ship. It doesn't howl so much as it comments. Like it's been watching everything unfold and finally has something to say. You remember that sound vividly. Even now, back in a world of chimneys and carriages. You'll be walking through a quiet street in London. And a breeze will shift in just the right way. And for a moment, just a moment, you'll hear that wind again. It comes back strongest in dreams. Not nightmares. Not exactly. But dreams of endless white. Of footfalls muffled by snow. Of sledges dragging behind you like ghosts tethered to your spine. And in the distance, always, the faint hum of that wind's voice. Speaking in a tongue you'll never understand. Today, you visit the British Museum. You didn't plan to. You were walking, aimlessly, as you often do now. When you saw the flyer. The Arctic exhibit. Britain's Lost Explorers. A chill ran down your spine. Inside, it's all very dignified. Clean glass cases, brass plaques, soft lighting, and there it is. A display titled, "Recovered Relics from HMS Erebus and Terror." You stare at a tin plate. A fork, a spoon with initials you vaguely recall. Maybe WG? William Gibson? Or was it Graham? The name doesn't matter as much as the fact that he mattered. Once. Another case holds a logbook. Pages bloated and brown from time underwater. The ink has bled, but someone has carefully transcribed each entry. Your eyes scan the dates. March, April, May. The words begin hopeful. Then routine. Then empty. In the far corner, a preserved coat, double-breasted, navy blue, now faded to almost green. The buttons shine dully in the museum light. You almost expect it to twitch. As if someone's still wearing it. As if the bones beneath it haven't been buried. Or lost. Or gnawed clean. Historians still argue whether these relics offer closure or merely decoration. Whether the exhibit is memorial or spectacle. Whether it honors the dead, or just parades them. You feel both honored and exposed. You move on. In a side room, you see it. The boat. Not the whole thing. Just part of a lifeboat frame. Reassembled from fragments pulled from the ice. Mounted like a skeleton in a museum of prehistoric beasts. Inside, a few items. Boots. Wooden slats. A makeshift oar. And in the center, a plaque. The Boat of Bones. Believed to contain 5 skeletons at time of discovery. Evidence of cannibalism present. You breathe in sharply. Not at the words. At the date. It's your boat. You remember it. The way the men lay curled together. Arms wrapped around themselves or each other. Not from comfort. From cold. You remember trying to lift one of them to make space, and realizing you didn't have the strength. You remember walking away. One slow step. Then another. You did not look back. Now, you look. You peer into that reconstructed frame. Glass between you and the past. One of the boots has a tear on the toe. You remember patching it. Once. Poorly. You find a bench and sit for a while. Long enough that a docent comes by and gently asks if you're all right. You nod. You're just remembering. Eventually, you leave. The world outside is noisier than you remember. Horse hooves clatter on cobbles. Someone yells about meat pies. A child laughs. You walk to the river. Not the Arctic one. The Thames. Murky and slow. And there, near the banks, you run into someone unexpected. A man in a naval uniform. Younger than you, but clearly seasoned. He recognizes you. Introduces himself. Lieutenant Harris. Part of the recovery team from the most recent expedition. He's bright-eyed, energetic, full of questions. You listen as he talks. He tells you about sonar scans. About the way the ship settled intact, as if placed gently on the ocean floor. About the objects they've recovered. There was even a journal. He says, written right to the end. You ask, what did it say? He shrugs. Hard to read. Damaged. Lots of routine stuff. Inventory. Weather notes. Then he adds, but the last page said something odd. The silence is eating us. You look at the river. That sounds right. Later that evening, you open your old journal. The one they gave you at the medical ward. You haven't touched it in weeks. You flip to a blank page. You write. Some things don't get better. They just get buried. You close the book. And then you look up. A breeze rustles the curtains. It doesn't sound quite like the Arctic wind. But it's close. You don't speak of it often anymore. Not because you've forgotten. Quite the opposite. The memories have grown so clear. So precise. You're afraid if you open the door even a little, they'll come pouring out in such detail that no one will believe they aren't fiction. And let's be honest, some already don't believe you. They think you exaggerate. They think no one could survive what you describe. They think the stories of pale corpses with missing limbs and journals ending in fevered scribbles are embellishments. But you know the truth. The Arctic doesn't care whether you believe in it. It swallows you just the same. You spend your days quietly now. Mostly at home. A modest flat with creaking floors. Near a bakery that sells a sweet bun you buy every Thursday. The smell reminds you of things you can't quite name. Warmth. Maybe. Humanity. You keep a map on your wall. It's not decorative. It's the same kind explorers used. Faded. Edges curled. A red thread traces your path from England to King William Island and then southward. Winding like a desperate vein across the ice. You added the thread yourself. One evening, in a fit of something like grief. And every time you glance at it, your eyes fall on one specific spot. Victory Point. It sounds triumphant. It isn't. Victory Point is where they found the note. The famous one. You remember the copper tube it was sealed in. Tucked into a cairn built by hands so cold they could barely lift the stones. The first part of the note had been written early in the expedition. It read like a postcard from a long vacation. Ships trapped. Men healthy. All in good order. Then someone added a second message. Another hand. A different mood entirely. Sir John Franklin died on the 11th of June, 1847. The rest is grim logistics. Who left when? Who remained? A tally of the dead so far. That note is now under glass somewhere. Preserved like a holy relic. You once ran your fingers over the indentations on the page. The second handwriting wasn't as neat. Slightly panicked. Even. That was Crozier's script, or so people say. He was alive when that edition was made. After that, no one knows. Historians still argue whether Crozier survived the full march. Or died in the wilderness. Or, some even claim, was taken in by the Inuit and lived under another name. There are whispers of an Englishman seen among native camps. Speaking in halting Inuktitut, wearing caribou skins. You never saw it, but you wonder. You met the Inuit again. Years later. Not the same ones, of course. But relatives. They had stories. Passed down. Stories of men with strange clothes and hollow eyes. Of ships trapped in ice. Of men who sat around fires and stared at nothing. One story caught your ear. A man who wandered alone. Carrying a book. He spoke little, smiled often, and died quietly beneath a stone outcrop. They buried him and placed his book atop the cairn. You asked where. They showed you. You went there. There was no book, just rocks, lichen covered, but you left a spoon beneath one stone. The same spoon you'd kept all these years. The initials had worn smooth, but the memory remained. The wind picked up that day. It sounded familiar. You remember the food most of all. Not because it was delicious, far from it, but because of what it meant. You remember chewing on salted beef so tough it pulled at your teeth. Porridge so thin it tasted like wet cloth. The occasional raisin like a pearl of civilization. But mostly, you remember the tins. Tins stacked neatly. Tins labeled with words like beef, and stew, and ox cheek. Tins that hissed when opened. That smelled strange. That sat heavy in the stomach and heavier on the soul. You later learned they were sealed with lead solder. That the supplier had cut corners to fulfill the Admiralty's order on time. That the contents spoiled faster than expected. That you'd all been slowly poisoned. But at the time, you just ate. You ate because hunger isn't poetic. It doesn't care about caution. When your stomach growls like an angry dog and your hands shake from cold. You eat whatever's in front of you. Even when it's gray. Even when it bubbles wrong. Even when it tastes like metal. You wonder how many men died not from cold or starvation, but from the food that was supposed to save them. There's a room in Cambridge now, some university lab, where they study the bones. They X-ray them. They test them for lead content. They look for knife marks. For signs of cuts made after death. They publish papers with long titles like Osteological Evidence of Dietary Deficiency in Polar Expeditions. They say the femurs tell stories. But you already know them. You heard them in the final days, men crying out for mothers. For God. For warmth. One man, you recall, kept asking if it was Sunday. He wanted to know if someone could read the Psalms. No one did. You were too busy surviving. Your neighbors think you're a bit odd. Quiet. Distant. You don't host dinners. You rarely attend church. But the baker saves you a bun each week. And the boy who delivers coal always nods. You don't need more than that. Sometimes, you visit the docks. Not to sail. Just to sit. You watch ships arrive, steamers, schooners, trade vessels. You listen to the ropes groan and the seagulls scream. You feel the salt in the air and imagine, for a moment, the scent of snow. You wonder if the ice misses you. You wonder if it remembers the ship. You wonder if it's waiting. The years pass, but the Arctic stays with you. Not in some grand, literary way. It's quieter than that. The memory of the cold lives in your joints. Stiff each morning as you roll out of bed. It echoes in your lungs during long walks. When the air catches sharp and dry at the back of your throat. It even lingers in your fingers, which still twitch now and then, as if remembering the act of tying canvas knots with numb hands. You never left it, really. Part of you is still out there on that ice, walking in slow silence beside sledges that creaked and moaned and eventually stopped. But here, in London, the world has moved on. You read it in the newspapers. Lost Expedition inspires new play. The tragic romance of Franklin's Arctic doom. Even children's adventure books, filled with brave sailors and roaring polar bears and mysterious maps. You want to laugh, or scream, but mostly, you just sigh. They've turned your starvation into a bedtime story. A publisher once approached you, said your account would make a fine memoir. The last living voice. He called you, history's witness. He offered an advance and a ghostwriter. You said no, not because you couldn't tell the story, but because you knew they'd want the wrong version. Not the one with sores that never healed, or teeth blackening, or watching a man with a frostbitten leg eat the last biscuit and lie about it. They don't want the time you boiled your gloves for broth, or the way you learned to sleep with your back to the wind and your hands curled under your arms like a frightened child. They certainly don't want the dream you had where the ship was a whale and you were in its belly, rowing against ribs and praying for stars. No, they want heroism, triumph, the tidy ending where you plant a flag and sip cocoa under the northern lights. But the truth is, you didn't conquer the Arctic. It let you go. You spend more time indoors these days. The cold bothers you more than it used to. Oddly, you bundle in layers, even when the house is warm. Old habits, maybe, or maybe the cold never left your bones entirely. The journal is almost full now. You've written pages about things you hadn't planned to record. Little things, a crewman's laugh, the way Franklin always straightened his coat before entering the mess, the ridiculous song one officer composed about seagulls and shoe polish, and one memory you tried to forget, the look on Crozier's face when he realized the men were eating the leather off the sledges. That mix of horror, resignation, and understanding. Historians still debate whether Crozier survived the march. You know what you saw, the way he walked ahead, each step measured, slower than the man beside him, the way he touched his temple when he thought no one was looking. Like his thoughts were leaking out. You remember the day you stopped seeing him at camp. No one spoke about it. There wasn't time, or breath, or courage. You made it to the final cairn on your own. Just you and one other. You don't know his name. You never asked. He died in the night. Quietly. You buried him shallow and didn't mark the spot. You kept walking. You tell yourself you had no choice. But sometimes, when your tea goes cold and the house falls quiet, you hear his breath still. Ragged, afraid. You don't write that part down. But you do visit the Naval Records Office. From time to time, it's quiet there, dusty, smells like old wood and older ink. You flip through logs and journals from later Arctic missions. Names you recognize, faces you don't. One entry catches your eye. It's from a later expedition that passed near King William Island. Years after, the officer writes, found traces of old camp, tattered Union Jack, bones scattered, snow undisturbed, felt watched. You close the book. You know that feeling. Even now, walking through Hyde Park or along the Thames, there are moments when the world goes quiet around you. A dog stops barking, a child stops giggling, the wind dies, and you feel eyes. Not malevolent, not kind, just present. Maybe it's memory, or madness, or maybe the Arctic is always watching the ones it let go. You wonder if the others who made it, few though they were, feel the same. There aren't many of you. Scattered across the empire like driftwood from the same wreck. You've only spoken to one. Briefly. He was thinner than you remembered. Quieter. You didn't speak of the ships. Just tea. The weather. Then he left. You suspect that's how most of you live now. Shadows in warm cities. Carrying the cold like a scar no one can see. The neighbors think you're eccentric. They don't understand why you keep a tin lantern by your door. Or why you sometimes stand barefoot in the snow for a few minutes at sunrise. They don't know you're listening. To the wind. To the creak of a mast that no longer stands. To the shuffle of boots on snow long melted. And every now and then, when the house is dark and the fire's gone out and you wake to the sound of silence, you wonder. Is the ship still there? Frozen? Preserved? Exactly as it was? Or did it finally slip beneath the ice? Taking your footsteps with it? Either way, you know this much. The Arctic doesn't forget. And neither do you. There's a particular kind of silence that only exists when everything is frozen. Not just cold, frozen. The kind of stillness where even your breath feels like it's waiting. Where the crunch of your boots is the loudest sound for miles. And it echoes like gunfire in a cathedral of snow. You remember that silence vividly. It's the sound that surrounded you during the march, when the sledges had grown too heavy. The men too light, and the land too vast. Each step forward was not about destination, but about defiance. Not progress, but endurance. You didn't walk because you believed in survival. You walked because stopping meant becoming part of the scenery. That silence met you again one gray morning. Halfway across a vast sheet of ice with no visible end. The horizon had dissolved into fog. There were no shadows. The sun was a vague smudge overhead. You couldn't tell north from south. Yesterday from today. You trudged forward anyway. The sledge creaked behind you. Two men were pulling alongside you. One had a limp. The other sang under his breath, not a song with words. Just a strange, rising hum. The kind of sound a man makes when he's trying to keep the shape of his mind from melting into the white. You didn't stop him. You understood. The day wore on like a blunt knife. The snow beneath your feet turned soft in places. Then unexpectedly hard. Once, your leg plunged into a hollow. You thought it was a crevasse. It wasn't. Just an old seal den. Long abandoned. You climbed out. Heart pounding. Not sure whether you wanted to laugh or cry. That night, you made camp beside a ridge of piled ice. A miniature mountain formed by the pressure of moving flows, blue-tinted. Sharp edge. Beautiful in a deadly way. You didn't have firewood, but someone found a few scraps from a broken sledge. You lit them carefully, cupping your hands around the flame like a sacred relic. The fire barely cracked, but its glow felt like 1,000 suns. You sat shoulder to shoulder with the others. No one talked. One man took out a diary. He flipped it open. Blank pages. He'd used the last of his ink days ago. And his pencil had broken. Still, he turned the pages slowly. Like he was reading something only he could see. You watched until your eyes stung. Later that night, he died. Peacefully. Curled like a child. The diary still in his lap. You covered him with snow the next morning. A quick prayer. A nod. No tears. Not because you didn't feel them, but because you couldn't spare the moisture. You walked on. The next few days bled together. The sledges grew lighter, not because the snow eased, but because there were fewer men to pull them. You began discarding things. First tools, then coats from the fallen, then the books. The books were the last to go. You remember dropping a copy of the Iliad. Its spine cracked, pages stiff with frost. You hesitated. Then you whispered a line from memory and left it on the ice like a tombstone. One day, you reached a river. Not the mighty back river you'd hoped for, but a smaller one. Half frozen, edged with willows. You didn't believe your eyes at first. Trees, trees. After so many months of white and gray and the endless breath of the wind, the sight of living wood felt almost offensive. You dropped to your knees, pressed your hand to the bark. Rough, solid, real. You camped there. You found berries, dried, clinging to the bushes. You picked them clean. Their tartness made your mouth ache, but they tasted like something you hadn't known you missed. You started to speak again. Actual words, not just grunts and gestures. Someone told a joke. It was terrible. Everyone laughed. That night, you dreamed of music. The organ on the Erebus, played off-key by the ship's steward. A sea shanty echoing down the companionway. Even the absurd tune MacDonald sang about a dancing walrus. You woke with a smile. It didn't last. The next morning, you found another body. He'd been part of the forward party. Camped just out of sight. Alone. His boots were off. His feet, frostbitten beyond recognition, lay beside him. He'd written something in the snow with his finger. A name, half finished. You buried him beneath the willows. Not long after, you discovered something even stranger. A structure. Rough, lopsided, barely standing, but man-made. A shelter. Not British, Inuit, but someone, one of your men, had stayed there. You knew by the marks. Initials carved into a bone spoon. A boot sole nailed into the wall. There were signs of a fire. Bones in a pile, carefully stacked. One skull, clean, placed upright, as if watching. You didn't disturb it. Historians still argue whether these makeshift shelters were signs of resilience or madness. Whether men were trying to survive, or clinging to patterns long after meaning had faded. You think maybe it was both. You stayed there one night. You found scraps of paper inside. One with a poem, incomplete. The stars wheel high in frozen dance, while men sleep still in hollow chants. You added a line, and I remain to write them down, though silence begs that I renounce. Then you burned the paper. The march resumed, but something had shifted. You no longer moved from desperation, but from memory. You wanted someone to know, to see, to remember that you were here. Even if only one man survived, that would be enough. You began placing markers more carefully, building cairns, leaving notes scratched into tin, a map etched on driftwood, a name carved into a tree. Proof of passage, of pain, of purpose. You didn't know if anyone would follow, but you hoped, and in that hope, you walked. Boots wear down in strange ways when you walk across ice for weeks. The leather doesn't scuff, it burns. Slowly, from the friction of snow granules fine as sand. The soles thin, the seams separate. One morning, you looked down and saw your toes sticking out. Blue and swollen, like some foreign object glued to your foot. You laughed. It was either that or cry. And tears cost water. So you laughed, patched it with a rag from a dead man's sleeve, and kept walking. You've reached the point in the march where names blur. The men around you aren't strangers, but they aren't companions either. You know who snores and who limps, who whispers at night and who talks to the fire like it will answer. But their names? You've stopped using them. It's as if saying them out loud will turn them into ghosts. One of them dies in his sleep. No drama, no sound, just doesn't wake up. You wrap him, gently, in the last bit of canvas you have. You place a note in his pocket. James, son of Arthur, kind, strong, walked far. You build a cairn, small, but steady. Then, something changes. It starts with a crack. Not a metaphor, a literal crack, deep, sudden, echoing underfoot like thunder from the earth's belly. The sea ice is shifting. For weeks, the world beneath you has been a frozen mirror. Now, it's breaking, slowly, reluctantly, but undeniably. The river ahead, real, broad, terrifying, is moving. Ice slush churns between plates. You see open water for the first time since the expedition began. It's beautiful. It's terrifying. You stop. You can't cross yet, but the thaw means land isn't far. Trees will grow thicker. Game might return, maybe even rescue. But also, moving ice means instability. Dangers you can't predict. Cracks open at night like trapdoors. So, for now, you wait. You make a camp near a rise of rock. It's the highest ground you've seen in days. Someone says it looks like a church. Someone else says it looks like a coffin. Neither feels wrong. You rest. For real this time. You build fires. Cook what you can. Lichens boiled into mush. A bit of preserved fat. One man finds something in a satchel. A tin of raisins. Long forgotten. He passes it around. 1 raisin per man. It tastes like sunlight. You talk more. Now, you tell stories. Of home. Of sea voyages. Of childhood mishaps involving stolen apples and stern governesses. You mention the canned pudding from the Erebus. The one that hissed so loud it scared the cook. You laugh about it. The laughter feels brittle. But genuine. One evening, you see a bear. Far off. Pale. Huge. It watches you for a long while. You don't move. Neither does it. Then it turns and walks away. You envy it. It belongs here. You've never stopped feeling like an intruder. That night, you dream of boots. Not yours. Dozens of them, scattered across the ice, upright, as if their owners simply vanished mid-step. Some full, some empty, all facing different directions. You wake with a shiver. The river is more open now. You begin discussing whether to launch the boat. Yes, the one you've been dragging this entire time, the heavy lifeboat stripped from the Erebus. You've cursed it 100 times. But now it might actually matter. You repair it as best you can. Seal the cracks with pitch and cloth. Re-rig the oars. It's not elegant. It's barely seaworthy. But it's hope. In a wooden shell. You carry it to the edge of the ice. 5 of you remain. You launch it. The sound of it hitting water is strange. Unfamiliar. Alive. You board. One at a time. The boat rocks. Groans. Then settles. You begin to row. Not powerfully. Not fast. But forward. And it's enough. Hours pass. You drift more than row. The current carries you gently. The banks widen. You see moss. A bird. Real bird song. Not the sound of ice creaking like bones. But a voice. Feathers. Movement. Someone weeps. You say nothing. The river splits. You choose the broader path. It's the wrong choice. The current strengthens. The boat strikes a submerged log. It jolts. Throws you sideways. You manage to hold on. But one man tumbles into the water. You reach for him. Too late. He surfaces once. Then silence. You float past. Stunned. And then the boat begins to take on water. You scramble to patch it. Tear fabric. Clog leaks. Bail with your hands. It works, barely. You make for the shore. The moment your feet touch land again, the boat collapses behind you. Splinters. Gone. You're back on foot. But you know now, you're close. You press forward. And then, you hear it. Voices. Not yours. Not wind. Voices. You stumble toward them. Half mad. Half frozen. Tears forming before the recognition even arrives. A camp. Real. Human. A hunting party. Inuit. Likely. Or traders. They turn as you approach. Their eyes widen. You fall to your knees. They speak. You don't understand. But they offer water. Fire. Food. And you. Too weak to speak. Nod. You've made it. You're alive. And for the first time in months, you allow yourself the impossible thought. You may actually remain that way. You don't remember much about the first few days after they found you. There was a fire. A real one. Thick smoke curling into the sky. The smell of seal fat and wood and warmth. You sat near it wrapped in too many layers. Blinking slowly. Half sure it was a dream. Someone pressed a bowl into your hands. Stew. Thick. Oily. Hot enough to burn your tongue. You cried. Quietly. Into the bowl. They didn't ask questions. Not at first. The people who found you, Inuit, kind-eyed and cautious, simply accepted your presence. Like a broken bird fallen from the sky. You were a curiosity. Not a miracle. They had seen others. They had buried others. You slept. Then you woke. Then you slept again. And somewhere in between, your body remembered how to live. The pain came next. Your fingers burned as blood returned to them. Your feet blistered, cracked, wept fluid. Your back ached from sleeping on furs instead of frozen earth. And still, you said thank you. With nods, with gestures, with eyes. One man, older, weathered, gray hair tied with sinew, seemed to understand you best. He pointed south, made a walking gesture, mimicked ships, tapped his chest, and pointed at you. You nodded. Yes, south, ships, me. You stayed with them for 2 weeks. In that time, You spoke more with your hands than your mouth. You learned the word for snow, aput, fire, akalik, and thank you, kuyanamik. You tried to offer things in return, buttons, a broken compass, your spoon. They accepted the spoon. The old man held it gently. He looked at you, then pointed at the sky. You didn't understand, but you nodded. At night, they told stories, around the fire, with the aurora whispering green and violet above. They spoke of ancestors, of spirits that move through ice, of visitors who come with smoke and metal and eyes too wide. You listened. One night, you asked, through awkward pantomime, about other white men. They nodded. Yes, they had seen more. Farther north, dead, some walking, some frozen in place, like statues. They described one man who had painted his face black with soot and danced around a fire before collapsing. You closed your eyes. You think you knew him. Eventually, they guided you to a whaling camp, seasonal, rough, but more connected to the outside world. A trader there, half Inuit, half European, recognized your accent. He stared at you as if seeing a ghost. Franklin's men? He asked. You nodded. His face changed. He offered you food, tobacco, a blanket. He poured tea, real tea, and watched you drink every drop. He sent a message, carried by dog sled, then by ship, then by telegraph. Your name, misspelled, but close enough. And then came the long wait. Winter was returning. No ships would arrive until the thaw. You knew the pattern now, ice in, ice out, and the window between. So you waited again. But this time, with warmth, with shelter, with faces. They asked your story, and you told it in pieces. At first, they were shocked, then quiet, then reverent. One man said, "You're the first I've heard speak of it who still breathes." You nodded. You didn't say that sometimes. You weren't sure if you did still breathe. You began to write again. A real journal. Now, not just scraps and half-burned notes. Pages and pages. You described the Erebus, her carved railings, her polished brass. You described the first frost, the first death, the slow unraveling. You wrote about Sir John, his firm voice, his pale hands, his gradual fade. You wrote about the march, the silence, the bones, the way men began to forget songs but remembered the smell of soup from childhood. You did not write about the meat. Not directly. You hinted. You left gaps. You let silence speak. Because some truths aren't written. They're felt. The thaw came with a roar. Ice cracked like cannon fire. Snow melted in sheets. Birds returned, first in twos and threes. Then flocks. And then, a ship. Steam-powered, black smoke rising like a signal to the gods. They took you aboard like royalty and invalid combined. Blankets, broth, blank stares. They didn't know what to ask. You didn't know what to say. The voyage south was uneventful. Save for your dreams, they returned stronger than ever. You dreamed of the terror. Caught in ice, rocking gently though the ice shouldn't allow it. You dreamed of Crozier, standing at the bow, mouth open, no words emerging. You dreamed of walking across the white, endlessly, towards something that was always just over the next drift. London received you in a whisper. No crowds, no trumpets, just a letter from the Admiralty, a medical check, and an uncomfortable luncheon where men in stiff uniforms asked if you might testify, discreetly. You said yes. They gave you a pension. Modest. You accepted. Then you disappeared into the streets of the city. A ghost in plain clothes. Fading like smoke into the soot and fog. No one followed. You visited the families. When you could. You told them what little you could. With as much gentleness as possible. Some cried. Some clutched your hand. One mother slapped you. You let her. You never returned to the sea. Not because you feared it, but because you'd seen it. Not just the water, but what lies beneath the maps, beneath the flags, beneath the pride. And you knew. The sea remembers everything. It simply doesn't always return what it takes. You begin to understand that memory has a scent. It's in the salt air off the docks. In the metallic bite of cold on a January morning. In the dusty leather of an old journal. Cracked along the spine. You smell it before you feel it, before you remember it, and then you're back on the ice. Even if only for a second. That scent follows you more often now. You keep to yourself these days. Your rooms are small, tucked above a cobbler's shop that smells faintly of polish and regret. There's a cat that comes to the windowsill every morning. You feed it scraps. It doesn't purr. You respect that. Most people who pass you on the street see just another gray-haired man in a wool coat. You like it that way. But once in a while, just once, someone recognizes you. The latest was a young man in spectacles, holding a book to his chest like a shield. "Are you the Franklin survivor?" he whispered, as though saying it too loud might make you vanish. You nodded. He looked at you like you were something ancient, fossilized, touched by time and frost. He didn't ask for a story. Just sat beside you on the bench and said, "I'm glad someone came back." You smiled. A little. He stayed 10 minutes, then left. Never asked your name. Sometimes, that's all people want, proof that someone survived. But survival is not a destination. It's not the end of the story. It's the long, winding middle where nothing makes sense anymore. You wake at night more often now. Sometimes from dreams, sometimes from aches, and sometimes from silence so thick it feels like the Arctic crept back in through the cracks in the walls. On one such night, you light a candle. You take out the journal again. You flip through the pages, some yellowed, others torn, and you find one particular note. A sketch of a cairn. You drew it years ago. You remember the rocks, the snow around it, the way the wind sang that night. That cairn had a message inside. You don't remember what it said anymore. Just that you'd written it with a frozen hand, thinking maybe someone would find it. Maybe they'd understand. You never heard whether anyone did. But then again, maybe they did. Maybe some part of your message lives on in the whispers of those who followed, who stood by that same cairn and felt something heavy in their chests. Without knowing why, historians still debate what truly killed the Franklin men. Lead poisoning? Starvation? Scurvy? Madness? The truth is, none of those alone. All of them together. And something else. Something harder to name. The weight of silence. When the ships stopped speaking. When the fire wouldn't catch. When the man beside you stopped answering, even though his eyes were open. That's when you began to understand what death really is, not absence, but emptiness. The Navy still doesn't know what to do with you. You're too valuable to ignore. Too inconvenient to celebrate. You've declined interviews. You've turned down invitations. Once, a painter asked to capture your likeness, as a symbol of Arctic tenacity. You said no. You are not a symbol. You are a man who walked far enough to lose everything but memory. And sometimes even that slips. Like the name of the cook who made terrible dumplings. Or the joke a midshipman told during a whiteout that made the entire tent shake with laughter. You remember the laughter, but not the words. That's how it begins. You start writing them down now. Not for fame, not for clarity, but because the fire inside is burning lower. And you don't want it to go out in silence. You keep the journal by your bedside. Some nights you write one word, wind, or teeth, or boots, each word a flare, cast into the darkness of memory. A kind widow down the street brings you soup every Sunday. She doesn't ask questions. She just leaves the bowl on the table, refills your coal bin, and smiles once on the way out. You haven't told her who you are. You don't need to. But she once said, "You're quiet, but your eyes are loud." You like that. You're not sure how much longer you'll be writing, or walking, but there's a calm in that now. Not fear, not even peace, just a sense that you've been through the deepest cold a soul can walk through, and returned. Maybe that's enough. Maybe survival isn't heroic. Maybe it's just the act of remembering. Long after others forget. So you keep remembering. You remember the man who gave you his mittens when yours tore. You remember the sledge carved with initials in 5 different hands. You remember the sun, when it finally rose again. After the long night. You remember what it looked like reflected off the ice, not golden, but pink, like the world was blushing. You remember standing there, eyes stinging, and whispering, so you came back. And somewhere, deep down, you still believed the ice was listening. The strange thing is, you don't remember when you stopped counting the days. At first, time was everything. You marked it with bits of charcoal, tallying each sunrise scratched into the ship's timber or the snow-packed walls of a tent. It gave you something solid, a rhythm to shape the void. But at some point, the tallies faded. The sun didn't rise for months. And when it did, it wasn't warm. It was a distant, pale coin in a sky that didn't seem to want it. So you let go of days and started counting something else. Footsteps. Fireless nights. The weight of silence on your chest like a second ribcage. Now, back in the city, time is once again structured and civilized. Church bells chime every hour. Train whistles mark comings and goings. The baker down the street opens at 7 sharp. Closes at 5. You try to match their rhythm. But yours has changed. Your internal clock ticks in slower increments. It measures loss in half-remembered faces and memories that resurface at inconvenient times. One of those memories comes to you unexpectedly, triggered by something absurd. You're sitting in your chair, sipping weak tea, and a spoon falls from the saucer with a soft clink. That's all it takes. You're back there, in the snow, bent over a sledge, too tired to speak, too cold to think. You hear the sound of a spoon falling into a tin bowl. And the man beside you groans, soft, involuntary. The stew had frozen. Again. And he'd broken a tooth trying to eat it. You gave him your portion. He didn't say thank you. Didn't need to. The next day, he couldn't walk. You carried his share of the sledge for 2 days. Then he told you to stop. Said he wanted to watch the sky for a while. You left him sitting against a drift. His coat wrapped tight. You didn't go back. There was no point. You still see his face in the corners of mirrors sometimes. You reach for your journal. Another line added. This one reads, "He watched the sky for all of us." You still visit the Royal Naval Club once a year. They hold a small remembrance for the Franklin expedition. It's polite, clean, orderly. A wreath is laid. A hymn is sung. They never mention the bones. You stand near the back. Say nothing. You listen to them speak of bravery and empire and the noble quest for knowledge. You think of broken fingernails and shallow graves. One year, a child approaches you, boyish face, cap askew. He tugs your coat. "Did you see the North Pole?" You smile. "No," you say, "but it saw me." The boy frowns, confused. Then he runs off. That night, you dream not of ice, but of light. A strange kind of glow. Too soft to be fire. Too warm to be snow. It surrounds you, carries you. The kind of dream that feels like floating. When you wake, you're crying. Not from sadness. From relief. It's one of the few dreams that doesn't end with a scream or a missing face. You find yourself walking more these days. Out of habit, perhaps, or out of instinct. Moving reminds your body it still belongs to you. You take long, meandering routes through the city, avoiding carriages and crowds. Your favorite spot is a small bridge overlooking the canal. It's quiet there. Ducks drift across the water like thoughts you can't quite catch. You imagine what the others would have thought of this place. How absurd it would have seemed, life going on. Carriages clattering, pastries in windows, paperboys shouting headlines, all that color after so much white. You wonder what they would have done. If they'd survived, would Crozier have returned to the sea? Would Fitzjames have written a book? Would Goodsir have studied medicine with new eyes? After watching men rot from the inside out? You'll never know. But sometimes, when the wind shifts and the sky grows pale, you feel them, not haunting you, just walking beside you, like they always did. You pass a bakery window. Inside, a row of lemon tarts. The kind the quartermaster used to describe endlessly during those long, hungry nights. You stare for a long while. You don't go in, not because you don't want one, but because part of you feels like you should be the one to taste it. So instead, you keep walking. Later that evening, you take out a sheet of paper. A clean one. You write a list. Names. Everyone you can remember. Even the ones you think might be slightly wrong. You write them carefully. Like a prayer. Like a map. You don't finish it in one sitting. But you'll get there. You owe them that. There's a bench in the corner of the churchyard where you sit most evenings now. It's not especially grand. The paint is flaking. The wood creaks when you lean back. But it faces west. And that means it catches the last rays of the sun. Those golden threads of warmth that seem to linger just a few minutes longer for old men with stories to carry. You bring breadcrumbs for the birds. Sometimes they come. Sometimes they don't. That's life, you suppose. On certain evenings, you're joined by Father Mallory, the vicar with soft hands and kinder eyes. He knows who you are but doesn't ask about it. He just sits. Sometimes hums. Sometimes prays under his breath. You find it comforting in the same way the soft crackle of fire was comforting during your worst nights on the ice, not because it solved anything, but because it persisted. He once asked you, gently, "Do you believe in divine purpose?" You replied, after a long silence, "I believe in snowflakes." He laughed. "A full, rolling thing. That may be enough." He said, "You're not sure what you meant either." But it felt true. Some days, children play in the yard, running between gravestones. Giggling, daring each other to touch the mossy angels. You watch them with something that isn't quite envy and isn't quite grief. You wonder if they'll ever hear your story in a history lesson. You wonder what they'll be told. That Franklin's expedition sought the Northwest Passage. That the ships were trapped in ice. That the crew perished. That some, perhaps, turned to dark means to survive. You wonder if your name will even be mentioned. You've read the official reports. They're neat, tidy, full of naval phrasing and distant analysis. They talk of disorientation, prolonged exposure, insufficient provisions. They don't mention dreams that come back with the smell of iron. They don't describe how silence tastes when it sits on your tongue for weeks. Historians still debate the meaning of it all. Was the Franklin expedition a noble quest? A failure of leadership? A collision between empire and nature? You could answer, but you don't. Let them argue. You just lived it. And not all of it was horror. There was a night, a clear, starlit one, when a man named Wilson carved a chessboard into the lid of a crate using a penknife and the back of a spoon. You remember him because he always sang, "Rule Britannia," out of tune. And because he insisted on calling the Arctic her ladyship. He lost every game, always with a smile. There was a morning when the frost on the rigging caught the sunrise just right and looked like fire. Everyone stood still and watched it, breath fogging in awe. For 30 seconds, no one moved, no one coughed, no one feared. There was a time when someone brewed spruce tea and managed to make it taste almost like real tea. And everyone applauded as if he'd conjured it from thin air. And there was a night when you told a joke, just one, about a penguin in a bishop's hat, and even Crozier laughed, his shoulders shaking, tears freezing at the corners of his eyes. You write those down now, too, in a second journal, a newer one, less about death, more about living. You don't show it to anyone. It's not for history. It's for memory. Yours. The list of names is growing. You remember Fitzjames's handwriting, elegant and slanted. Goodsir's habit of counting everything, even snowflakes. Lieutenant Irving's quiet voice and the way he folded every piece of paper into a triangle before tucking it away. You write down stories beside each name. Not how they died, how they were. A laugh, a song, a stubborn refusal to wear gloves. One evening, as the sun melts away behind the rooftops, you see someone approach the bench. A young woman this time. She looks familiar, though from where? You can't place. She asks, "Were you there?" You don't ask what she means. You nod. She sits beside you, opens a satchel, pulls out a leather-bound notebook. She flips it open and holds it on her lap. "I'm trying to understand," she says. You smile. Then you're already ahead of most. You talk for an hour. Maybe more. You tell her about the ship's library. About the way men held onto their uniforms long after they had any real meaning. About how one man, Thompson, you think, used to iron his sleeves with a hot rock just to feel something close to order. She writes it all down. You don't mind. When she leaves, she thanks you, not with words, with her eyes. It's enough. You sit on the bench until the bells ring vespers. Then you stand, slowly, carefully, and head home. The wind is rising. It whispers past the gravestones, curls around your collar, and carries the faintest scent of something old and sharp and familiar. You smile. You whisper, "Still here." The wind doesn't answer, but you feel seen. The winter comes early this year. Not in the Arctic. Of course, you're thousands of miles and years away from that place now, but in London, where the gray seems heavier than usual. And the chill in the air isn't just weather. It's a memory, crawling up through the soles of your feet. You layer your clothes more than necessary. Thick socks, 2 scarves. Your old naval coat, now threadbare at the cuffs, still fits. The buttons are mismatched, one of them is carved bone. You know whose it was. You try not to think about that too much. The streets are quieter these days. Or maybe you're just walking at different times, avoiding the crowds. You like it best when the fog rolls in off the Thames and the gaslights float like stars adrift. It reminds you of ice fog, how it settled over the ships in a hush. How even a whisper sounded loud against its stillness. You pass a bakery. The windows glow. Inside, people laugh. You walk on. Back home. You light a lamp and sit at your desk. The list of names is nearly complete. Some are written carefully. Others, hastily, as if memory had rushed forward with urgency. A few are followed by a single line of description. Loved music. Stole sugar. Once punched a seagull. You smile at that one. It's strange. What sticks? Not the dates, not the ranks, but moments, fleeting, ridiculous, human. One name gives you pause. You trace your finger over the ink, frowning. You can't remember him clearly. You want to. You see his face, blurred, a beard, perhaps, or clean-shaven? He might have had a limp. Or was it the other one? It bothers you, not just forgetting the man, but forgetting his place in the story. As if part of your own journey has gone missing, buried somewhere in frost and time. You write anyway. He walked beside me. That's all I need to know. Later, you step out into the alley behind your flat. The moon is out, pale and full, and the sky above London is unusually clear. You can see stars, faint, trembling, but there. You tilt your head back. It's been years since you've seen the aurora, but your body remembers the posture, the angle, the expectation. You close your eyes, just for a moment, and suddenly, you're there again. The ice field stretches to the horizon. The snow glows under a moon that feels close enough to touch. A man beside you breathes slow and shallow. The sledge has stopped. There's a crackling fire, not from wood, but from whale oil burning in a tin lamp. You see footprints, your own, others, all leading nowhere. And above it all, light, colorless, shifting, silent. The aurora, it dances just for you. You open your eyes, and you're back in the alley. Breath clouding, fingers cold. You whisper, thank you, to the night, to memory, to the ones who didn't return. Inside, you find a letter, delivered earlier. You hadn't noticed. It's from a university, a professor of anthropology. They're planning a symposium, the human side of polar exploration. It says, they ask you to speak. Just a few words, nothing formal. You hesitate. What would you even say? That frostbite is quieter than most people think? That silence becomes a person. Eventually, that some part of you is still out there, listening to the snow, but something tells you to say yes. So you do. The lecture hall is warm, well lit, too many chairs. They sit you at the front while the professor reads names of the dead. Your heart beats strangely when you hear them aloud. It's like hearing someone recite your own past, page by page, without knowing the weight of each word. When it's your turn, you stand slowly. You say, I was there. Silence. Then you add, we did not die all at once. We faded. We cracked like the ice. We hoped too long. And when we stopped hoping, we walked. You pause. Then, people ask about the cannibalism, as if that's the most terrible part. You let that hang in the air. Then you say, the terrible part was remembering the warmth of someone's laugh, and then forgetting their voice. No one breathes. You sit down. Later, people approach you, not with questions, but with eyes full of softness. One young woman presses a paper into your hand. It's a poem, about snow. She says, I hope it's right. You say, it is. You go home, and that night, you sleep without dreams. Just warmth, just breath, just the soft hush of snow falling far away. You wake slowly these days. Not from sleep exactly, but from stillness. Your body feels heavier in the mornings, like it's reluctant to be pulled back from wherever it goes in the night. You sit up, stretch your fingers, and listen to the creak of the floorboards, the ticking of the clock, the wind brushing gently at the window pane. The world is kind enough to wait for you. You make tea. It takes time. The kettle wheezes. The warmth in your hands feels earned. You take it to your desk, where the journal waits, open to the last page you wrote. There's an unfinished sentence there. You don't remember writing it, but the ink is yours, and the slant of the words is unmistakable. It trails off like a thought that never found its end. You finish it now, and still, I remember the way his hands shook when he lit the last flame. You stare at the words for a long moment, letting them settle. There's a knock at the door. You rarely get visitors, but it's not unpleasant. It's the widow from next door, Margaret. Gentle, endlessly practical. She has a shawl over her shoulders and a dish of something steaming in her hands. I made soup, she says. You step aside and let the warmth in. She doesn't stay long, leaves the soup on the table, straightens a picture frame that didn't need straightening, and pauses at the journal. Are you still writing? You nod. Good, she says. Write it all. You smile. After she leaves, you eat slowly. The soup is thick with barley and herbs. It tastes like comfort. It tastes like now. Outside, the fog returns. It always does. London wears fog like a memory. Soft, layered, familiar. It wraps the buildings in gauze and makes the gas lamps glow like stars too shy to shine properly. You slip on your coat, the bone-buttoned one, and go out. Your feet know where they're going. The docks. It's been weeks since you walked there. But your boots find the rhythm of the old boards easily. The water below laps quietly. Brown and endless. You lean on the railing and watch. There's a ship moored at the far end. Newer build. Steel framed. Wide in the belly. A merchant vessel. Likely. The kind that doesn't fear the north anymore. Men move along the gangway, unloading crates. Calling orders. Laughing. One of them wears a scarf just like the ones you wrapped around your face on the march. He waves at you. You wave back. He has no idea who you are. You stay there until dusk. A boy passes by selling papers. You buy one. The headline isn't about you. Or the north. Or ghosts on ice. But near the bottom, in small print, there's a brief. New evidence in Franklin case. Inuit testimonies resurface. You read it twice. It mentions sightings, old stories passed down. Men in tattered uniforms wandering through the white. Speaking English in broken phrases. Asking about rivers. About London. About names long lost. One story says a man named Thomas lived among them for a year. You sit on a crate and breathe. Thomas. That could have been any of a dozen men. Or just one. You look at the water. And you speak. Quietly. I hope you saw the aurora one more time. You fold the paper. Tuck it in your coat. At home. You write again. This time, not in the journal. In a letter. To no one. And everyone. If you are reading this, it means we were found. In one way or another. And if we weren't, know that we tried. We really tried. Not for glory. Not even for discovery. But for each other. Because even in the coldest place on earth, kindness still burned. You sign it with your full name. Then you seal it. You don't know where it will go. Maybe nowhere. Maybe someday someone will find it in a box and wonder who you were. Let them wonder. You have nothing left to prove. That night, you sit by the fire. The room is quiet, but your mind is not. You hear footsteps crunching snow. You hear a man clearing his throat before reading from a soggy, half-frozen book. You hear laughter. You hear life. And then, just before you drift into sleep, you hear the creak of a ship's hull settling into ice. Not a threat. Not a warning. Just a memory. Returning home. There's a box under your bed you haven't opened in years. You placed it there deliberately. Packed it slowly. Like a ceremony. Folding time into layers of linen. Wrapped in silence. But something about tonight draws you toward it again. Maybe it's the wind. It has a tone you recognize. Maybe it's the dream you had last night, the ship. The stars. The soft, terrible quiet that followed a voice calling your name. Whatever the reason, you bend slowly, open the drawer, and slide the box into the light. It's smaller than you remember. Inside, a folded flag. Once vibrant, now dulled to the color of fog. A small wooden carving of a dog. Its edges worn smooth. A square of canvas with two names stitched in black thread, yours and his. You run your thumb along the seam. And beneath it all, a notebook. Not the journal. Not the one you fill with names and memories and tea-stained reflections. This one is older. You open it gently. The first pages are records, dates, duties, inventory. 3 barrels of salt pork. 14 pairs of boots. 1 silver sextant. Later, the handwriting loosens. Phrases become shorter, more personal. Thompson lost his gloves again. Hid the last of the raisins in the map chest. Crozier says the light is changing. He doesn't like the feel of it. Goodsir worries about the food. I told him not to say it aloud. Then, 2 men missing. Sledge overturned. Marks in the snow look like crawling. And finally, we burn what we can. Books. Bits of broken crates. I thought I saw a man through the fog this morning. I didn't follow. You close the book. For a long time, you sit there in silence. Not the kind you used to fear, the Arctic silence that swallowed breath and thought and song, but a warmer kind. One filled with creaking floorboards and the faint tick of a clock you've owned so long you don't hear it anymore unless you listen closely. You rise. You place the notebook on the mantel. Beside the spoon. Beside the drawing of the cairn. Not on a pedestal. Not under glass. Just there. As it should be. You step out into the night. The streets are quiet. A soft mist clings to the edges of the buildings. Your boots tap gently along the cobbles. You find yourself at the river again. The Thames flows slowly, like it remembers too much. You lean on the rail and watch your breath swirl into the air. A gull lands nearby. You nod at it. It ignores you. You pull from your coat a stone, smooth, round, heavy with thought. You brought it from the north, picked it up on the edge of King William Island and carried it all the way home. Never knew why. Until now. You whisper a name into it. Then another. And another. 29 in all. Then you toss it gently into the river. It disappears without a sound. You walk home in the dark. Back in your flat, you notice something different. The photograph on your shelf, the one of the Erebus at anchor in Greenland. Sails full, flags proud, has tilted slightly. Just enough to catch the candlelight. You straighten it, then pause, and leave it tilted. You sit in your chair, journal in your lap, and write. The ice held us. The silence taught us. The stars forgave us. You're not sure what that means. But you trust it. You make tea. You wrap the shawl Margaret left last week around your shoulders. And as you sip, the wind returns. It presses softly against the windows. You hear it hum, not like a storm, not like a threat, but like a voice remembering a song. You close your eyes, and for the first time in a long while, you feel not haunted, but held. You've stopped wondering if they'll ever find the rest. The ships, the bones, the journals that never made it into cairns. The true answers to questions that historians ask with ink-stained fingers and furrowed brows. You once thought it mattered. Now, you know better. Truth is scattered across the ice in pieces so small, so softened by time and wind and snow, that gathering it all would be like trying to reassemble a snowflake long after it's melted. Besides, truth isn't always what people want. What they want is a story. And you've given them one. They've taken parts of it now, written books, drawn maps, painted great scenes of noble sailors with steel jaws and blazing eyes. You've seen the exhibitions. You've even been invited to one. Once, you declined. Instead, you walked the perimeter of the museum, listening to the echoes of children tapping on glass cases. A woman described one display as tragic, but terribly romantic. You nearly laughed, not from amusement, just from how far away that description was from anything you ever lived. There was nothing romantic about frozen blood or the sound of a man begging to be left behind because his legs would not obey him anymore. You returned home in silence. But you kept walking. The park is your favorite place now. There's a small pond near the back. And on certain mornings, the mist over its surface looks just enough like Arctic fog that you feel a flicker of the old ache in your chest. You sit on the bench there. Watch the ducks. A boy asks if you've ever been to sea. You smile. Once, you say, a long time ago. He points to a toy boat floating near the reeds. It's made of twigs and string. Clearly homemade. He says, that one's called Victory. You nod. A strange name, you think, but not wrong. Because survival, even bitter and broken, is a kind of victory. You make your way home before the rain starts. The house smells of coal dust and old paper. You open a window anyway. Let the cold in. Just a little. You pull out a letter that arrived yesterday. You haven't opened it yet. It's from an academy, naval. From the seal. Inside, a request for a personal account. For students. For the next generation of sailors and mapmakers and dreamers. You hold it for a while. Then you write back. Not a full account. Not a confession. But a memory. You write about the first time the ice cracked beneath your boots. About the sound it made. Like a sigh from the belly of the world. You write about how the sky turned gold one night. And no one spoke. Because the light was too sacred. You write that you survived. Not because you were stronger. Or wiser. Or luckier. But because someone else gave you the last of their water. And didn't tell you until afterward. You write that the hardest part wasn't the cold. Or the hunger. Or even the things you had to do to stay alive. It was coming home. And realizing you were the only one who remembered their names. You don't sign it with your rank. Just your initials. That night, you light a candle. You open your window wider. And as the wind moves through the room, stirring the papers, lifting the corner of a blanket, you whisper again. Still here. It answers. Not in words. But in presence. It's snowing. London snow isn't like Arctic snow. It doesn't fall in sheets or scream across the land in white, blinding walls. It falls soft and lazy. Like it has no particular place to be. It settles on rooftops and windowsills and the shoulders of strangers walking without hats. It melts before it matters. But still, when you see it from your window, something inside you pauses. You reach for your coat without thinking. Outside, the street is nearly empty. A milkman trudges by with his cart. A dog barks twice, then loses interest. Your boots leave clean prints on the pavement. And for the briefest moment, it's as if the snow respects your silence. You walk to the cemetery. You don't go often. It's not grief that keeps you away. It's reverence. But today feels right. There's a grave there, not of anyone you knew personally, but one that bears the name of a crewmate from the Erebus. Reinterred long after he died. Once his bones were found and brought home like relics of some frozen crusade. The stone is simple. Thomas Armitage, Royal Marines. Lost, 1848. Returned, 1880. You brush the snow from the lettering. You don't say anything. You just stand there until the flakes start to settle on your hat. Your shoulders, your hands. You close your eyes. Not in prayer, in memory. You picture the camp, the one where you think he died. The canvas torn in the wind. The fire too low. The boots lined with straw. You hear the cough. You smell the oil. You remember him humming, just once, the refrain of a hymn he didn't know all the words to. And now, here he is, returned. You walk home, back in your flat. You're surprised to find a visitor waiting outside your door. A man, middle-aged, holding his hat in his hands. His eyes uncertain. He introduces himself. James McTavish, grandson of Robert McTavish, who died on the Terror. He says he's been trying to track down anyone who knew anything real, about what happened. You let him in. You make tea. He doesn't push. He just listens. You tell him about the time Robert fell through the ice while fetching snow to melt. How 3 men pulled him out and wrapped him in their own coats. How he shivered for 2 days but didn't stop smiling once. You tell him how Robert once traded an extra biscuit for a story. Your story, about a thunderstorm in Jamaica you barely remembered. He called it, the best deal of the expedition. You don't tell him how Robert died. But you place a hand on the younger McTavish's shoulder and say, he was good. He mattered. He mattered all the way to the end. And that is enough. When he leaves, he's crying. Not loudly. Not broken. Just touched. You sit in your chair long after the door closes. You stare at the fire. You imagine the faces you haven't seen in decades. They're clearer now, as if speaking their names has summoned them back into focus. You say them aloud, not in a list, in conversation. You ask Fitzjames if he'd still wear that ridiculous necktie. You ask Goodsir if he ever learned to swim. You ask Franklin if he thought of his wife in his final hour. You don't expect answers, but you listen anyway. You fall asleep in the chair. And you dream of ships, of stars, of a line of men walking across an endless stretch of snow, slowly vanishing into the white. One turns, smiles, and keeps walking. You wake with tears on your cheeks. You let them fall. You receive a letter from the Admiralty. It's been years since their last contact, formal, perfunctory, full of naval stamps and neutral phrasing. But this one is different. This one is warm, or at least trying to be. They inform you that a new search has uncovered another camp. Scattered remains, a few artifacts, among them, a spoon, a small wooden button, a scrap of uniform. They ask if you might come to identify, if not the bodies, then the spirit of the place. At first, you consider declining. The idea of standing beside another frozen pit filled with half-remembered men feels like too much. Like being asked to open a door you sealed shut with frost and silence decades ago. But something in you shifts. So you say yes. They arrange transport. A ship, not like the ones you knew. This one hums with engines and heat and steel. It cuts through the waves like a knife. Indifferent, clean. The Arctic doesn't look like it once did. The ice is thinner. The coastlines have shifted. But when the cold hits your face as you step ashore, it's like greeting an old friend. One who never quite forgave you, but still lets you in. The camp is quiet. Just bones now. Scattered. Handfuls of things. The snow has not covered it yet. You kneel near a cairn, hastily made. Partially collapsed. They've marked where they found the remains. You ask for a moment alone. They step away. You reach into your coat and pull out a small object, a compass. Long broken. The needle rusted stiff. It was given to you by a boy on the first day of the expedition. You don't remember his name. Just his grin, his excitement. You bury it in the snow beside the stones. Find your way, you whisper. When you return to the ship, the archaeologists ask if you recognized anything. You say, all of it. They don't press. You spend that night on deck, bundled in coats, watching the aurora slide across the sky. Even now, it stirs something in you. A wordless ache, a quiet song that only ever plays in the wind. You speak their names again, one by one, not aloud, just in your chest. When the ship brings you home, you find the city unfamiliar. Not because it has changed, but because you have. You no longer flinch when you pass bakeries or butcher shops. You no longer hesitate to speak their stories. You even buy a new journal. Not to record grief, but to remember light. You write about the color of the sea ice at dusk, how it turned lavender. You write about MacDonald trying to train a sled dog to fetch tea. You write about the time Crozier caught snowflakes on his glove like a child. You write about the last laugh you heard before the silence took hold. And you realize, these are the pieces that matter. Not just how they died, but how they lived. The young woman who once asked you to share your memories sends you a note. She's publishing a small book, a collection of recollections from forgotten explorers. She asks if she can include your stories. You say yes, on one condition. Tell them we were kind. You write, tell them we tried. The next morning, the air is sharp and still. You step outside. The street is quiet. A boy rides past on a bicycle, scarf trailing like a flag. You stand there, watching, and for a moment, just one, you feel them all walking beside you again. Boots crunching snow, hands pulling rope, voices whispering jokes under breath. They are not gone. They are with you. Always. You turn back inside. The kettle whistles. You pour the water. You sit down. And you write. We were not lost. We were here. And someone remembered. The letter arrives wrapped in a blue ribbon, slightly smudged from travel. It smells faintly of pressed flowers, lavender, perhaps, or something meant to carry comfort. You open it slowly, careful not to tear the edges. It's from a schoolteacher in Devon. She says her class has been reading about explorers, about Franklin, about you. She says the children had questions. And would you mind answering? You sit back and smile. Children always ask the best questions. One of them wants to know, what was it like to be cold all the time? Another asks, did you ever see a real polar bear? But it's the last one that holds your breath in your chest. Were you scared? You write back, yes. You say, not at first. At first, you were proud, determined, full of the noise of empire and certainty. But the silence came soon after. And with it, the realization that nature doesn't care about medals or maps. You write, fear wasn't the loud kind. It was quiet. It was knowing the wind might take your words, and the ice your feet, and the hunger your name. You don't know if they'll understand. But maybe that's alright. You seal the envelope and walk it to the post. Your joints ache, but the movement feels good, necessary. Like some part of you still wants to march. Still remembers the rhythm of trudging through snow. On your way back, you stop at a small print shop. In the window is a sketch, a reimagining of the Erebus. Caught in ice, sails tattered but defiant. Below it, in elegant lettering, they sought the passage. The ice had other plans. You step inside and buy a copy. You hang it above your fireplace. Not to glorify what happened, but to honor it. You make tea. You open the newer journal, the one with more smiles than silence, and add another memory. This one is simple. You write about the day someone found a single green sprout growing between rocks. Long after everyone had given up hope of seeing anything alive again. You remember how they knelt, hands trembling, and cried. You remember how no one said a word. It was spring, barely, but it was enough. That night, you find yourself humming a tune. One you haven't heard since Crozier tried to play it on the ship's organ. Badly, everyone groaned, threw soft things at him, and then joined in. You hum it now, quietly. It doesn't hurt. It heals, a little. You stare out the window. The snow has stopped. The sky is clear. Stars again. You don't see the aurora tonight, but you feel it, somewhere out there, pulsing like a heartbeat above the frozen earth, lighting the bones of ships and men who never made it back, but who still remain. You raise your mug. To them, no toast, no speech, just the gesture, a promise, that you'll carry them, that you'll remember, that you won't let their stories melt into myth, because someone must speak, and tonight, that someone is you. The candlelight flickers as you write, casting soft shadows that dance along the edge of the journal. Your fingers ache a little more than usual tonight. The joints are stiff, the knuckles swollen, but you keep going, pressing the nib gently into the paper. Steady, deliberate. The story isn't finished. Not yet. You're writing about the time the sun came back. After months of darkness. After hallucinations and whispers and the slow, strange stretch of a night that never ended, it returned. Pale at first, hesitant, but golden enough that it made grown men weep. You remember the way the light hit Crozier's face. He didn't smile. He simply closed his eyes and stood there, arms at his sides, as if surrendering. That moment has lived in your memory like a photograph. You write it now with care. You don't know who will read it, or when, or even if they'll believe it happened that way. But it did, and that matters. A knock at the door. You rise slowly. Margaret again, holding a basket this time. Inside, fresh bread, a wool scarf, a letter. No words are exchanged, just a look. She's good at silence, like you. You sit with the bread and the scarf folded across your knees and open the envelope. It's from someone at the university. The same young woman who once asked you to tell her everything. She's done it now, finished the book. Your stories, the drawings from your journal, quotes from your letters. It's called What the Ice Remembers. She writes, I tried to be honest. Not just about the dying, but the living. Thank you for letting me see. You press the letter to your chest and breathe. You read that title again. What the Ice Remembers. It's perfect. You think of how much the ice must hold, bones and buttons. Bits of canvas, names muttered in the last breath of frost. But also laughter, hope, little acts of kindness never recorded in official logs. That's what she captured, and what you always feared might be forgotten. You spend the next few days rereading your own journals. It's not easy. Some entries are smudged, others written in a hand that no longer feels like yours. But the rhythm is there, the march of thoughts across time. You find notes about sun dogs and fishhooks. About a tin of mustard someone guarded like treasure. About the way someone sang a lullaby to himself every night, not realizing you could hear. You underline that one, and in the margin, you write, he never made it back. But his song did. One afternoon, a local reporter arrives. She's polite, earnest, wants to know what it felt like to survive. You offer her tea and a chair. But not much more. What can you say? That survival is complicated? That you came back changed? That part of you didn't return at all? You tell her one thing. It wasn't bravery. It was love. That's what kept us walking. Love, and the memory of warm things. She writes it down. You don't know if she understands. But she tries. And that's more than most. You walk more. Now that spring is creeping in. The birds are back. The trees are waking. There's a quietness in the city again. But it's a living quiet. Not the Arctic's ghost stillness. You sit in the park. Coat open. The sun on your face. You let it warm you. The children chase each other. The air smells of earth. You see a woman reading a copy of What the Ice Remembers. She doesn't recognize you. You don't interrupt. You just watch as she turns a page, wipes her eye, and keeps reading. You smile. You go home. That night, before you sleep, you light the candle again. You open your journal, and write one last thing. We were cold. We were hungry. But we were never alone. Then you close the book. Gently. Like it's the end of a prayer. The sound of the city fades more easily these days. You find yourself drifting into memory without trying, rising early, staring out the window, and realizing half an hour has passed while you've been seeing a different sky. A different horizon. Not rooftops, not chimneys, but white, endless, absolute. The Arctic is never far. Not in your mind, not in your bones. You feel it in your knees on wet mornings. In the dull ache behind your ribs when you breathe too sharply. In the odd moment when the silence between passing carriages grows long enough to remind you of the wind over ice. Today, you sort through your belongings. Not because you expect to go soon, though the thought no longer frightens you, but because you want the pieces of your life to make sense to someone else. Should they find them, you make 3 piles. Things to give away, things to keep near, and things to bury. Among the second pile is a small envelope. Long unopened, sealed with wax now crumbling. It's addressed to you. The handwriting is shaky, angular, clearly written by someone exhausted. You open it. Inside is a note. Just a few lines. You gave me the only warmth I had left. I pray you make it. If you do, tell them I tried. There's no signature. But you know the hand. You fold it slowly, place it back in the envelope, and move it to the third pile. You won't let it be read by just anyone. Some words belong to silence. You walk down to the post office later that day with a bundle of other letters. Responses to people who have written since the book came out. There are more than you expected. Letters from strangers, from widows, from students who never knew history could feel human. One girl writes, "I used to think explorers were just men with maps. But now I think they were people who were really, really scared, and walked anyway." You write back, "That's exactly right." The postman nods at you with quiet familiarity now. You wonder how many of them know who you are. On your walk home, you stop by the bookstore. In the front window is a second edition of What the Ice Remembers. There's a new foreword. You didn't write it, but they quoted you. "We did not walk into the white to conquer it. We walked to remember each other." You smile at that. Inside, you sign a few copies. Quietly, the shopkeeper watches without interrupting. Just offers you a cup of tea. You decline. You have something else to do. That evening, you finally visit the Maritime Archive. You hadn't been there in years. Too many memories, too much officialness. But now you feel ready. You browse the shelves, the folders, the drawings. You find a file marked Crozier. Francis R.M. The pages are yellowed, the ink faded. Official reports, last known location, speculation, nothing that would tell you who he was. You add your own note. Handwritten, slipped into the back of the file. It reads, "He never stopped leading, even when we stopped following. He walked farther than any of us." You leave it there. Let someone discover it someday. Let them see the man, not the myth. On the way home, the clouds part just enough to show the stars. You look up, and for the first time in months, you swear you see the shimmer of green at the edge of the sky. Faint, flickering. You stop. A moment passes, then another, and then, it fades. But the feeling stays. Spring arrives more honestly this time. Not the false kind, where frost hides beneath daffodils. But the real one, wet pavement drying under sun. Children shouting in the park. The scent of thawed earth drifting through your open window like a soft reminder. You're still here. You begin to sleep longer. Not because you're tired, but because your dreams have softened. They're not full of ice anymore. Not full of hunger. They're quieter now. Slower. You dream of tea being poured. Of pages turning. Of snow melting off the roof of the Erebus and dripping rhythmically into a tin cup someone placed to catch the sound. You wake, and that rhythm lingers. There's another letter waiting for you. This one typed, neat, precise, almost too clean. It's from a naval historian. He's preparing a comprehensive report on Franklin's expedition and has questions. Specific ones. Did you ever see signs of mutiny? Did anyone deliberately withhold rations? Did Crozier survive longer than we think? You fold the letter. Leave it unanswered. Not because you don't remember, but because those are not the questions that matter. You take your walk. Same route, same bench, same pond. There's a new child feeding ducks. His bread is too dry, and the ducks avoid him. But he doesn't mind. He hums as he tosses crumbs. Unconcerned with approval. You nod at him. He grins. You sit for a while and think of MacDonald. How he once carved little animals out of whalebone, hiding them in the sleeves of the sick for good luck. Or how Goodsir once built a sundial from the broken bits of a tin lid and measured days that had no sun. You write that memory down when you get home. It's small, but full of something tender. There's not much room left in your journal now. You've filled page after page, not just with memories, but with moments. The quiet kind, the ones no one records in naval reports. The way a man turns his collar up against the wind. The laugh that slips out even when you're freezing. The half-sung lullabies someone offered to the night. You think, sometimes, about what happens after you're gone. Will someone find the journals? Will they read all the way to the end? You don't know, but you write anyway. That evening, Margaret brings stew and insists on staying for a cup of tea. She straightens your bookshelf for the third time this week. Dusts a frame that didn't need dusting. She picks up the compass, the broken one. You carried this the whole way? You nod. It never worked, she says, but you brought it back. It pointed home. You reply, not correctly, just enough. She smiles. You tell her a story, about the tin of mustard. The song about seagulls. The time you all stood in a circle and waited for the sun that never rose. She laughs. Not because it's funny, but because it's human. When she leaves, She touches your shoulder. You should be proud, she says. You are, but not in the way people expect. You're proud that you remembered. That you didn't turn it all to stone. You light a candle. The pages glow softly in the firelight. You open your journal and write your second to last entry. The cold never left me. But neither did they. You close the book. And for once, you don't feel alone. You feel carried. The last page waits for you. It's not a burden, not anymore. It's simply the end of a thread you've been carefully, gently weaving back together over a lifetime. Some parts frayed, some tangled, but the shape is there. The pattern is clear now. You sit at your desk. The journal open. The window is cracked. The spring air carries faint traces of blooming lilac and coal smoke, of London shifting toward warmth again. You run your hand over the final sheet of paper. What do you write when everything has already been said? Not an ending, not a summary, just another moment. You write about the time the dogs refused to move, curling up beside the men as if to say, not today. Not yet. You write how one of the youngest lads, a boy named Temple, lay down between them. And for the first time in weeks, everyone slept through the night. You write how that morning, the sky was pink. You remember it as the color of mercy. There's a knock at the door. Not Margaret this time. A young man, hair tousled, breathless from the stairs. He introduces himself, assistant to the historian you ignored weeks ago. He doesn't ask questions. He offers you something instead. A box. You open it. Inside, a single silver fork. Scratched, pitted, on the handle. Initials you once traced in the cold with your thumb. FJC. You don't speak. You nod. You place the fork on your mantel. Beside the spoon. Beside the sketch of the cairn. Beside the broken compass. A small altar of memory. You thank him. When he leaves, you sit in your chair and let the silence return. But it's a good silence. A full one. The kind that no longer threatens to swallow you, but instead cradles you gently in its palm. You lift your pen. You write, I carried them here. They carried me farther. Then, one line more. Let the rest stay with the wind. You close the journal. The candle is low. The sky is turning lavender again. You draw the curtain, but leave it slightly open. Just enough to let the starlight in. Just enough to remember. And when you sleep, it's not a restless sleep. It's deep, quiet, full of ships sailing slowly through mist, toward a place not found on any map. A place where everyone is warm. And no one is alone. The ice is behind you now. You no longer feel it in your hands, or your chest, or your jaw when you speak. You feel warmth instead, a steady kind, like the sun filtered through linen, or the breath of someone resting nearby. It wraps around you gently, like the end of a long song. You don't need to remember every name anymore. You've spoken them, written them, folded them into pages that will hold them when your voice grows too soft to carry them on its own. Someone else will take them now. Someone younger, curious, standing at the edge of a library shelf or a museum case, wondering what it felt like to walk into the white. They'll wonder, and they'll feel it. This story you've left behind. Not just the cold, but the hope, the small defiant joys, the friendships frozen in time, then thawed gently back into life with every word. So breathe slowly. Let the candlelight flicker low. Let the air move around you like snow drifting without urgency. You're not on the ship anymore. You're not standing on the ice. You're here, in your room, blankets drawn up to your chin, the fan whispering softly, the night folding itself around you like a promise. And you're safe. And you're warm. And you are, finally, home. Sleep now. Sleep well. End of script. Sweet dreams. Extended epilogue. What you remember most. The rain begins just before dawn. Not hard, just enough to tap lightly at the glass, to suggest itself rather than announce its arrival. It's the kind of rain that never bothers with thunder or wind. The kind that lingers for hours, soaking in, a patient rain. You wake without an alarm. Your body knows the rhythm now, the creak of the floorboards, the kettle's groan, the way the room smells slightly different after it rains. You sit in your chair by the window, journal on your lap, though you don't write today. Not yet. Instead, you stare at the mist clinging to the street outside and let your thoughts drift the way they used to drift across the sea, slow, steady, pulled not by wind but memory. You remember a man named Edward. No one ever talked much about him. He wasn't a commanding officer, wasn't particularly loud or clever. But you recall the way he patched boots, anyone's boots, with such quiet focus. Always humming, always generous with the small comforts. He once gave you the last corner of his wool blanket. You never gave it back. Years later, when your bones ache and your nights stretch longer than they should. It's not the maps you remember. Not the rows of numbers or the etched coordinates. It's Edward's hands, working over leather, careful not to damage the stitching. It's strange, isn't it? The things that survive inside you. Not the storms, but the moments of stillness between them. You close your eyes. The rain continues, soft and even, like breathing. You think about how often silence was a thread on the ice. How it meant absence, of life, of warmth, of certainty. But now, silence is something different. Now, it holds space. You get up and cross the room to your shelf. There's a small tin there. Dented and old. Something you kept out of habit more than sentiment. Inside, a thimble, a worn button, a tiny braid of faded thread. You don't know whose they were. But they meant something once. And now they mean something again. You place them gently on the table. Let them sit in the light. Let them be seen. Because even forgotten things deserve mourning. Outside, a bird calls. You don't recognize the sound. Not quite a sparrow. Not quite anything you remember. And it makes you wonder. How many songs went unheard out there in the white? You wonder if the snow ever listened. You return to your chair. Blanket wrapped around your knees. Journal still closed. You're not in a rush. You've learned that time, once your enemy, is now your companion. It no longer drives you. It walks beside you, like they once did, and you can almost hear their voices now, not as echoes or ghosts, but as breath beside your own. Fitzjames, mocking your handwriting. Crozier, lecturing the snowdrift for collapsing too early. Goodsir, whispering facts about seabirds as if the ice itself needed educating. They're here, because you've kept them here. Because every morning you opened your eyes was another moment they could exist again. You reach for the journal. Flip it open, but instead of writing a story today, you list names. Not ranks, not titles. Just names. First names. Quiet ones. You whisper them as you write, as if reciting a prayer known only to you. And when you finish the page, you close it. No summary. No explanation. Just memory. You light the stove. The crackle of flame feels good, comforting in a way even blankets aren't. You warm your hands and think about the first time someone lit a fire inside the canvas shelter. And how everyone took turns just sitting near it, as if remembering what heat felt like required rehearsal. It wasn't just warmth. It was proof that something could still start. That combustion, spark, life, still had permission to exist. You stir your tea with slow, methodical movements. The spoon makes that soft, familiar sound against porcelain. You pause to listen. Let it wash over you. Outside, a bicycle passes. A dog barks once and is gone. The world doesn't wait for you. But it no longer needs to. You're not catching up. You're simply here. Later, you receive a parcel. Brown paper. Strain. A return address from Canada. Inside, a small painting. A watercolor of the terror locked in ice, but bathed in soft light. The artist writes that they painted it after reading your words. That they'd never seen snow but somehow felt they understood it now. You place the painting above your bed. It's quiet and beautiful. You think maybe the ship looks too graceful. But then again, who are you to say what others should imagine? After all, you once thought exploration meant glory. Now you know it means remembering. Evening comes. You take your walk. The park smells like thaw and moss. Children are still playing, even as the shadows stretch longer. One of them is singing something tuneless but proud. You pass a man carving a piece of wood on a bench. You don't speak. You just nod. The world is full of people who make things with their hands. And that feels like a kind of hope. When you return home, the sky is nearly purple. You light one candle. You open one window. And you write one more line. Not because the story needs more, but because you do. You write, no matter how far the ice reached. It never took the whole of me. You let the ink dry. You smile. You rest your hand on the closed cover. Fingers splayed. It's enough now. You've carried them far. They've carried you farther. And together, quietly, you begin to fade into sleep. The candle flickers. The journal waits. And the stars, steady as breath, rise once again. End of script. Sleep well. Truly.